Let's get ugly.
Welcome to MojoPlays. I'm Aaron Brown.
And I'm Aaron Klein.
And in this showdown, it's the battle of the Aarons as we go head to head and take on the zombie hordes to pick our top 5 Resident Evil video games.
As always, these are our personal favorites, so be sure to let us know what your top 5 Resident Evil games are down in the comments.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. My number 5, Resident Evil Code Veronica X. The remake Capcom keeps ignoring, Code Veronica was the first next-gen Resident Evil game after its initial PS1 trilogy, and from its opening cutscene, it absolutely blew me away back on the PS2. The perfect blend of RE3's more action-focused gameplay and the original game's puzzles and full-on camp story, all the elements that made the RE series so iconic were present and accounted for. Looking back today, a lot of elements don't hold up, especially the new villains and characters. Even back in the day, I couldn't stand Steve Burnside. But for the series' first steps into the next generation, Code Veronica did an admirable job of blending the old and the new, and was a fitting swan song for the canonical old-school style of RE games before Resident Evil 4 changed the series forever.
You attack the island. And my sister.
My number 5, Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City.
You guys must be the new Delta team.
I know. Operation Raccoon City might be one of the most hated games in the Resident Evil series, but any game where we get to play as Hunk, I'll enjoy. Operation Raccoon City may be a generic third-person shooter set during the outbreak of Raccoon City, but the real draw is the ability to change the RE timeline. Having to fight and possibly kill our heroes from some of our most beloved Resident Evil games would have drastically changed the course of the series. While the gameplay, AI, and overall game might not be that great, seeing the events unfold from a different perspective was enough for me to genuinely enjoy playing this mess of a game.
The targets have been apprehended.
Eliminate them and bring us the girl.
We can do that, but first we need to renegotiate our deal.
What are you talking about?
My number 4, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. I was a bit late to the Resident Evil scene and was only briefly introduced to the franchise by a childhood friend just before Resident Evil 3 Nemesis came out. So technically, 3 was my very first RE game. While this is admittedly like jumping into the deep end of the pool to learn how to swim lore-wise, I was nonetheless enthralled evading zombies, solving puzzles, and especially running from Nemesis. Maybe it was the over-the-top blood and gore, the cheesy B-movie style dialogue, or Jill's miniskirt that made this one of the formative games of my teenage years. RE3 was like a gateway video game for me that opened my eyes to other horror video game series like Silent Hill, and made me go back and play the previous 2 entries just to further understand what I was fighting Umbrella for. However, even though many will decry that the original or its sequel are the superior PS1 entries, they just couldn't measure up to that first encounter with Nemesis outside the RPD.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
My number 4, Resident Evil The Dark Side Chronicles.
Not bad.
Darkside Chronicles took 2 of the best stories in Resident Evil and allowed us to experience them on rails. Going through the events of Resident Evil 2 and Code Veronica with a new look and perspective was refreshing. Darkside Chronicles also had an original story with Operation Javier that focused on Leon and Krauser's first mission together. Darkside Chronicles somehow took the creepy atmosphere from Resident Evil 2 and Code Veronica and added more terror as we had to face our zombie problem head on with nowhere to run. The Wii version is my go-to, but Darkside Chronicles was released on the PS3 along with Umbrella Chronicles in the Resident Evil Chronicles HD collection. I, for one, prefer the waggle of a Wiimote.
My number 3, Resident Evil 2 Remake.
Don't shoot! Get down!
I'll admit I had fallen off with the RE series after 5, which, while I know it has its defenders, never really clicked with me the way RE4 or the original games did, but after that jaw-dropping reveal, I couldn't wait to get my hands on the remake of RE2, which was already arguably one of the best games in the series. Capcom's remake of RE2 set a new standard for industry remakes going forward by being faithful to the original while also adopting and innovating many modern gameplay mechanics gamers expect. And then there was Mr. X, the infinitely memeable Mr. X. Being relentlessly stalked by an invulnerable monstrosity was harrowing, and I can still hear his footsteps stalking me when I walk around my house in the dark at night. Everything about the RE2 remake made the series better, and made the disappointingly short RE3 remake seem far less impressive by comparison, although I did still enjoy my time with it.
I really hoped it wouldn't end up like this.
So that's all this was? I was just some pawn to you?
My number 3, Resident Evil Revelations.
It's time you learned the truth, Miss Valentine.
Revelations felt like a much-needed shift in focus when it comes to Resident Evil. It came at a time when the franchise was shifting to a more action-oriented game. Revelations felt like a step back into the horror that Resident Evil once was. The boat is one of my favorite locations ever in a Resident Evil game, having tight corridors and nowhere to run when confronting the evil on board. Even when not on the ship, the snow-covered levels still invoke horror even if they're more action-focused. Revelations teetered on the line of horror and action, but had a nice balance that never leaned one way more than the other.
The storm is gone now. But how long will it last?
My number 2, Resident Evil Village.
Well, Ethan Winters. You escaped my little brother's idiot games, did you? Let's see how special you are.
After rediscovering my love for the RE series through its impressive remakes, I was greatly anticipating the release of RE Village, and not just because of the big lady. I don't handle horror titles like I used to, so I skipped RE7 for that exact reason. But Village felt more akin to RE4 levels of horror, so I felt more comfortable jumping into the newest entry, and I was not disappointed. Blending the best of both worlds and allowing players to explore much of the village at their leisure, discovering its many secrets and horrors, Village hit the sweet spot for me in terms of action and frights right up until the baby, and the less said about that, the better. But I very thoroughly enjoyed my time with Ethan's supposed last outing, and I eagerly await whatever Capcom has next for us in the mainline series.
I can show you things even Chris doesn't know I can do.
My number 2, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard.
Welcome to the family, son.
Resident Evil 7 could have been the best Resident Evil game if only it had stuck the ending. The first 2/3 of the game are amazing. At first, I wasn't a fan of the shift to first person, but after creeping through the decrepit hallways of the Baker Manor, my worries quickly left and fear took its place. The residents in this house were evil. Sorry, I had to make that bad joke, but the Bakers were truly scary. Each of the Bakers had unique areas that all felt like they belonged to one family. Playing the game in VR is where the terror truly lies. Playing the opening sequence in VR scared the crap out of me, especially the first time I saw Jack walk by. My heart skipped a beat. Now, I said 2/3 of the game were amazing. The end of the game just felt oddly placed and felt like an unnecessary way to connect the story to the Resident Evil timeline. Despite the ending falling flat, the good parts overshadowed the horrible ending.
I'm Redfield. Glad we found you.
My number 1, Resident Evil 4 Remake.
You talk too much. Failed!
You had to already know this was coming, but did you guess which version? Obviously, given my affinity for Capcom's recent remakes, there was a lot of not only anticipation for the remake of RE4, but also trepidation, because how do you improve on what's widely considered one of the greatest games of all time? Somehow, Capcom managed the impossible, and RE4 managed to once again set a new bar for not only themselves, but video game remakes as well. Revisiting the original was a bit tricky for me due to being conditioned to modern controls, such as moving and shooting at the same time. And while this was obviously one of the most welcome changes in the remake, the teams at Capcom went even further than just a simple reskin and tweaked not only the story, but events to keep you constantly engaged with no respite or interruptions to your pure enjoyment of a brand new classic in the RE catalog.
Mission accomplished, right?
My number 1, Resident Evil 4. RE4, in my opinion, is the best game ever made. There's a reason this game has been re-released over and over again. We still have our traditional campy RE goodness with one-liners and questionable voice acting at times, but the setting and mood of Resident Evil 4 are amazing. The fear of stopping to take a shot in a crowd of baddies or choosing to run never gets old. This fear is only magnified once you get Ashley tagging along. Knowing that you not only have to worry about your safety, but now hers, adds so much panic in some situations. Resident Evil 4 is a game that I play at least once a year, and each playthrough is as enjoyable as the last. A game full of great enemies, weapons, and set pieces, it's no wonder why so many people just like me love this game.
So, after you take me back to my place, how about we do some, overtime?
Sorry.
Somehow I knew you'd say that.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.